So, I'm a bit later on this video than I would have liked, but the analysis/discussion video for Haunting of Herobrine 2 is finally here. The film came out 2 years ago on September 16th, 2017, so now seems like the best time to do this video. If you aren't aware of what this is, it's a Minecraft fan film by Half-Life 390 that's about the titular character Herobrine and the efforts of a family to try and stop him for good. While it may be a tad difficult for people with zero experience and knowledge about Minecraft and Herobrine to enjoy, it's still a good film and is worth seeing. Now if you haven't seen the film, you might want to go and do that first because you probably won't understand most what's happening here and you might not even really enjoy it. Granted, perhaps the detailed efforts of the creator that I point out here might actually get you to watch it, which that might work for you, but for other people it might just be too confusing or not very interesting if you don't have any prior experience with the films. If you are unsure if you want to watch it, I do have a review on the series, which, albeit kind of old and hasn't really aged very well, it's the only review of it as far as I'm aware, so there's not really much other options out there. So, I would definitely recommend to do that first, but if you want, you can go ahead and watch this all on its own. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get started. Now, a lot of this film's lore and story is told through subtle context clues that one could easily miss on their first viewing. In this video, I'm going to point out every hidden detail and clue that I managed to find, and there's actually quite a bit. To start us off, we only have to look 5 minutes into the movie to find the first hidden clue. In Bradley's journal, there's a bit of text at the bottom that seasoned Minecraft players may recognize as the same characters used in the enchanting table. This language is actually the standard galactic alphabet from the Commander Keen games. Translating it into English gives us relic table. Now in the film, the only thing associated with the Herobrine that I would consider to be a relic or even a relic table is the beacons. It's also possible that it's referring to an enchanting table since we see one in room 33 later in the film, and one at the very end, making it very rare and also table is in the name. I'm leaning more toward the former, however, since there have been 2 confirmed beacons in the series, with one being underground as the journal indicates, while the second enchanting table I mentioned seems to be in some other dimension and might not even be canon, it might just be symbolic, I'm not entirely sure there. The next thing to note is that Hudson Engineering Incorporated is the company that is digging near the hotel. This is the same company from the beginning of the film that was run by Ralph Hudson, implying that he is either still alive or managed to give his notes to his successor to try and carry out the work he and Bradley started. This would explain why they're there, since Pablo does mention that they're trying to find some sort of ancient artifact, referencing the journal from earlier, and is likely the reason why they were killed, since they were getting too close to the beacon. Now, this is where some things get a bit more complicated, as some of the things I'm about to bring up are really mysterious and don't have any definite explanations behind them. Early on in the film, we can see a man in a red shirt in the background, before eventually talking with John face to face. The first conversation they have makes them seem like nothing more than a regular guest, but it's clear that that's not what they are at all. According to Pablo, there shouldn't be any other guests here, and in the early scenes that we see this person, they're moving impossible distances in between shots, from one hallway to the next, and sometimes to completely different sections of the hotel. Not only that, they disappear after Pablo interrupts their conversation, yet Pablo doesn't seem to notice them, and John doesn't even check to say goodbye or even bring up the fact that they met somebody with Pablo. In their second and final conversation, the guest tells him to stop the investigation because he isn't safe, and then also tells him to go to room 33 before vanishing again. This person clearly isn't normal. They disappear without a trace, and they seem to know more than what's going on than a normal guest should. He's concerned for John and even knows something about room 33. What makes it even stranger is that he stops playing a role in the story after this point, and the film isn't even halfway done. However, he still appears in the background shots later on, implying that they're more important than the film would have us believe. The only one I managed to find is at 2 hours, 1 minute and 34 seconds, where we can see the guest walking under the skylight, although considering how many shots of supposedly empty rooms and hallways there are, I wouldn't be surprised if there were more. The fact that scenes like this even exist in the film shows that they're important, but we don't know why. There is a moment at 2 hours, 8 minutes and 56 seconds where someone can be seen through the window of a door. It could be Pablo, but that's still pretty strange since Half-Life 390 dedicated a couple of seconds just to this one moment. However, something even more intriguing happens after their second meeting. A strange sound starts to play from John's computer, though he doesn't seem to notice. However, using a program called an RxSSTV, these sounds can actually be converted into images. I've dubbed these sounds transmissions, for reasons that will become apparent later, and here's what it looks like after conversion. You notice that the language used here is also the same as the one from the journal, so it can be translated just as easily. It says, They saw him, which I believe could refer to two things. It could be referring to John seeing the guest, or it could be referring to the black figures that recently started showing up just before this message. I don't think it's referring to John's first encounter with Herobrine, since it's obvious that he saw him, and happened about 6 minutes before this message shows up. Something else that also bothers me is that at 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 48 seconds, just before the transmission, the screen distorts, which I'm sure is meant to indicate something. However, after taking screenshots of the scene and brightening up, I still haven't found anything. What confuses me the most is the contents of the QR code. Scanning it sends you to a note with only a few characters, b.h.l/2. I tried looking at it several different ways, as an equation for a triangular prism, adding it to URLs, and even trying to use it as a key for a code, but nothing worked. Maybe it's something that will become clearer once the maps are released to the public, but as of right now, it's still a mystery to me. Only a few seconds later, another QR code shows up on the leftmost monitor. Scanning it takes you to a private video titled Garbled Transmission 1 of 2 that also has a message hidden in sound. This is the reason I dubbed the other ones in the film transmissions. What makes this one special is that it's much longer than the rest, lasting over 4 minutes. Once the sound is completely converted, we get an image of a present on the roof of the hotel in the moonlight. During John's first encounter with Herobrine, we actually see the same present appear in the hallway briefly, which, as far as I can tell, merely serves as additional emphasis that it's important. Later in the film, the present shows up one final time in room 33. Presents in Minecraft work like chests, so I'm certain that these clues are telling us that we should check the present for an item inside. An item like a book, perhaps, that will give us answers to some of our questions. It might even be a link to the second garbled transmission, since I couldn't find it anywhere else in the film. Something random that I found that may not matter is this room number here. Typing the numbers into Google told me that these numbers are used a lot in the show Lost, so I'm pretty sure it's just a reference, but who knows? The inside of the room may have a clue to answering some of the biggest questions of the film. It probably won't, but it wouldn't hurt to check either. Now, back to stuff that I know is important. At 1 hour, 44 minutes, and 54 seconds, another message is sent that reads, "Don't trust him." This occurs after Adrian saves John and before Pablo and John do the seance to try and banish the spirits at the hotel. So I'm certain it's either referring to Adrian or Pablo. For the sake of argument, let's consider the guest real quick. In the film, the guest only shows concern for John and even tries to help him by pointing him in the right direction, so I'm fairly certain it's not referring to him. It also can't be Adrian because the film clearly shows that he's opposing Herobrine by holding him back and trying to help John. In the final scene of the film, he and Herobrine are shown to be on opposite sides of this strange dimension as well, but we'll get to that later. By process of elimination, it must be Pablo, but I also have evidence to back it up. At 1 hour and 48 minutes, just after completing the seance, Pablo stays behind, saying that he's looking for some manifests, which is pretty suspicious, especially since this area of the attic is right where the beacon that John extinguished was, and because of the way the camera lingers on the scene. And what happens at the end of the movie? The hotel's beacon has been rebuilt and relit without any explanation. While this definitely casts suspicion on him, there's one more piece of evidence that confirms my theory. In this scene here, we can see that Pablo and Herobrine are talking with each other near the meat locker/freezer, followed by a trail of blood, possibly indicating that more of the Hudson engineering employees have been killed and stored like they were before. This means that Pablo is a member of the cult of Herobrine that's later mentioned in Adrian's journal. Otherwise, there wouldn't really be much of a point in bringing up the cult in the first place. This makes more sense when you consider the fact that no bodies could be found for any of the 18 disappearance cases that took place at the hotel. It implies that Pablo has been killing these people and then storing them in the basement, hence the reason why he doesn't want John to go down there. This also explains why the freezer doors were suddenly jammed shut after John ran in there just the night before, since Pablo wanted to hide the fact that he was killing more people. Unless, of course, that wasn't the freezer, but a separate room like a meat locker, but I doubt that. The reason he needed to kill them is that it helped Herobrine become stronger. Adrian's journal mentions that Herobrine is a demon that uses the souls of the dead to gain power.
Well, what does the book say?
I'm still not sure yet. I know it says something about how to banish evil demons who use the souls of the dead to gain power.
And during night 6, we see what I believe to be the spirits of past guests turned into the black figures that haunt the hotel, which implies that Herobrine also uses either the souls or the bodies of Pablo's victims as his servants to do his bidding. Pablo being a member of the cult could also explain what the stuff in room 33 was. With all the blood and mystical objects, it's possible that it's a room used for rituals or something. The last thing that needs to be mentioned about this transmission is that it has a picture of an owl. However, after watching the film for the third time, I still have no idea what it could be referring to, so I'm certain that it's also something that can only be understood once I have access to the map. The final transmission is sent after John meets his father outside the window of room 33 and after Herobrine tried to attack him. The message is, "Where did they go?" This message is then followed up with coordinates for the map, which is clearly telling the viewer to visit them. I honestly don't really know who the message is referring to aside from Pablo, since they reported it as missing at the end, but I imagine the answer is at those coordinates. What I'm more concerned with is how this message was completely disregarded by both John and Pablo. They just have a conversation while it's happening, but the sound is so high that I honestly can't believe either of them would just ignore it. I know I wouldn't.
I just don't understand this. Are we hallucinating?
No, these pictures are proof enough.
It makes me wonder if perhaps transmissions don't actually exist in universe as messages to John from someone like his father, and instead are messages to the viewers from Half-Life 390 himself. I'm honestly not really sure which it could be, but considering how one of them involves map coordinates, I'm leaning more towards them being messages for us. Now for the final clues. At the end of the first film, as the screen fades to white, we can hear a crying baby in the background, which was pretty weird to me and I thought it was just something random. After finishing the second film, as the screen fades to white, we hear the same crying again, and my entire perception of the first film's ending has changed. It's clear that it's meant to indicate something, but I'm not entirely certain as to what. The only thing I can think of is that it's meant to indicate John has a child. The reason I think this is that our last scenes with Adrian in the first film ended with the crying baby, only for the next film to feature his son as the protagonist. So it's possible that that's what the ending here is meant to imply as well. In the final scene of the film, we see Herobrine facing Adrian and a Hudson engineering employee separated by an enchanting table, with what appears to be a hellish landscape behind the former and a flat black platform behind the latter. What I believe this indicates is that Herobrine is back in hell, with these two ensuring that he stays there, which would imply that John was actually successful. But who the heck is the engineering guy? None of the employees from the Hudson Engineering had any importance to the story, I thought. That is, until I remembered that we learned that the graves of Tom and Dodd were former employees of the original miners from several years ago, and are possibly where all the events that led up to Bradley's death began.
Jesus. Graves? This just raises more questions.
I'm as perplexed as you are. I've looked through the old files we have about the mine shafts here, and these two names do show up on the employee register.
Since their graves have been in both films, they're the only engineers that have some sort of story significance, leading me to believe that the person standing next to Adrian is either Tom or Dodd. There's one final clue that I found, and it's in the very last frame of the film. We see a bunch of letters and numbers that are clearly some kind of code. This is the code that I tried solving with the first transmission, but after trying different methods and even requesting help on Discord, I couldn't solve it. Fortunately, Half-Life 390 was kind enough to let me know that this code can't be solved yet until the key needed is revealed, so for now, I won't worry about it too much. And with that, we've covered everything I managed to find. I'm honestly really surprised with how much was hidden throughout this film. Before watching it for the first time, I figured it'd be about as long as the original and would end the entire story. But after seeing that it was an over 2 hour long full-length film, as well as all the extra clues and mysterious characters that he added, makes me believe that there may indeed be a third film in the series. Heck, it might even be a prequel that explores what happened to Tom and Dodd in order to explain why they're important. Either way, I'm really excited to see what comes next. Now you might be asking why I decided to make a video about this. Well, aside from the fact that I promised I would in the description of my review of this series, there are two reasons. The first being that more people really need to know about the effort that Half-Life 390 put into this film. He deserves so much more appreciation than what he's gotten. So far, I haven't seen any other comments about the stuff hidden in the film, and considering how very few people have seen Garble Transmission 1 even after 2 years, with some of these views liking it being Half-Life 390's, at least 5 or 7 of them being mine, and I imagine a few of the other viewers didn't even know what to do with it. It's clear that the vast majority of people who've seen this film have no idea how much went into its creation. The second reason is that, while I've managed to do well so far, I don't think I'll be able to do it all on my own. Some of the clues I really don't understand, and even if they make sense once I get to explore the map, there's no telling what kind of puzzles or riddles await me. They might be too difficult for me to solve. And then there's the instances like with the distorted screen. Was there actually something there and I just missed it? If so, having more people looking for this stuff will significantly reduce the chances of clues being missed or misinterpreted. So if you've seen the film before and found something I didn't, or interpreted clues differently, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear it. And if you haven't seen the film but want to, go do it. You might find something that no one else has. And with that, I think I'll be heading out now. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you once again to Half-Life 390 for creating this great series. I know you've been looking forward to it ever since my review came out, so I hope it was worth the wait. I imagine that there's a good reason why the maps haven't been released yet, so I'm hoping that you can resolve the issues soon, because I'm dying to get some answers. And when they finally come, you can be sure that I'll make a video on it. Until next time, this is Commander Wolf, signing out.